All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Michael White, and I'm one of the Deans of Students at Glenbard South. I'm also the Equity Coordinator, Link Crew Coordinator, Summer School Principal, and Freshman B-Boys Basketball Coach. And I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to our first FUSE meeting, which stands for Families United in support of equity and excellence for all, especially students that identify as African American or Black, which is a part of our Glenbard Parent Series. And I'd also like you to save the date of December 2nd, which is our Find Your Future College Night. Now, this meeting will be in person or virtual, depending on current COVID guidelines at that time. I'd also like to thank Ms. Susanna Malone, who is our District Equity Coordinator.
Thanks for the welcome, Michael. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So as Michael White just said, this program, FUSE, is a part of the Glenbard Parent Series. The Glenbard Parent Series is in its 27th year, and these are the people that make this all possible. In addition to our regular sponsors, on the back, you'll see our additional sponsors, and one of the sponsors I want to make note of tonight is Success in Teens from Naperville, and they're joining us in partnership tonight. So welcome. Welcome to everyone. The Glenbard Parent Series events, FUSE, our programs in Spanish. We're having this program in Spanish on Thursday night, and our programs that are held throughout the year, all 50 of them, are open and free to everyone. So we ask you to please share the word, like us on Facebook, and check out our Instagram, and share this resource, because now more than ever, this information, it can be really life-changing. And that's the way that I think of this program tonight. So I'm glad that you have taken the time to join us. On February 2nd, we will have the third of the 3 FUSE events. Dr. Michael Allen, who's principal of a middle school in Evanston, has written a book called Brotherly Love, quite inspirational about the story of how he took guardianship of his younger brother when he was in college. And now the 2 gentlemen have their PhD and are serving youth in our country. And so that should be another inspirational program. Without further ado, let's begin our program. We're going to hear first from Ava Blalark, and then we'll hear from Fiona Arthurs, and then we'll come back and we'll have a conversation. As questions come up, please enter them in the chat box. Susanna, thanks for listening and being here tonight, and Michael as well, and all of you. Ava is a social work interventionist at Glenbard East High School. She's also an author. She's a licensed clinical social worker, the author of the book V.A.L.U.E.D. Fiona Arthurs has been with us before. She's a marriage and family therapist in Carroll Stream as part of the Carleton Center. And we're so excited to have both of these experts with us tonight. So let's start with Ava. Ava, take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that we can get started. Okay. Like Ms. Ross said, I'm Ava Blalark, a licensed clinical social worker and social worker interventionist at Glenbard East High School, along with Ms. Fiona Arthurs, licensed marriage and family therapist. And tonight we're going to be presenting to you positive parenting and social emotional health for the teenage years. I don't know if you recognize this guy on the screen, but this guy is Kevin Arnold from the Wonder Years. And growing up, this was one of my favorite shows, and I'm probably telling my age by saying that, but it's okay because I'm comfortable with it now. And growing up, I was really invested in this show. You know, would he end up with the girl Winnie? Would he get his driver's license? So this show chronicled his teenage years, and it's told from his perspective as an adult. And it lasted for about 6 years. And in the very last episode, the last season, as an adult, Kevin Arnold says, growing up happens in a heartbeat. One day you're in diapers, the next day you're gone. But the memories of childhood stay with you for the long haul. I remember a place, a town, a house like a lot of other houses, a yard like a lot of other yards, on a street like a lot of other streets. And the thing is, after all these years, I still look back with wonder. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't always look back on my teenage years with wonder. And in fact, sometimes I look back in absolute horror. But he did get one thing right, and that is that the memories of childhood stay with you for the long haul. And I'm sure many of us remember our teenage years. I'm not sure how many of you would actually want to go back to those teenage years, but for me, it wasn't quite like the Wonder Years. And so I'll tell you a little story. The year was 1996, and to me, it's one of the greatest years ever. It's the height of the Tupac and Biggie beef, but before either one of them passed away. It's the year that President Bill Clinton was about to be reelected for a second term. And it was the beginning of the Bulls' second three-peat. And another important thing in that year was that I was in 8th grade. And back then, 8th grade graduation was a big deal. We had a luncheon, we had a dance, and all this meant to my parents was a lot of money, because that meant trips to the beauty shop, new clothes, new shoes. My parents had been divorced by then for about 3 years, and we were living with my mom. And my parents were arguing about who was going to pay for graduation. But to me, it didn't matter who paid as long as everybody showed up. And I planned on inviting everybody, my parents, my siblings, my grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, my cousins, everybody and their mama were supposed to be there. And me and my best friend went shopping. This is what we wore in 1996. I had shoes like this. We call them stacks. This is why I look back in horror. My hairstyle I couldn't quite find because it was a mix of the two of these. I had the finger waves in the front like Missy, and then flips in the back like Rihanna. I couldn't actually find any pictures, and I probably wouldn't show them to you if I could. But we were ready. We were fly. So graduation day came, and it's amazing. And me and my classmates are running down the hallway screaming, 96 is in the house. And we burst into the foyer to meet our family and our friends. And I scan the crowd, and I'm looking for my family. And I don't see my grandparents because my grandfather was dealing with cancer at the time, so they couldn't attend. And I don't see my dad because at the time he's in jail. And I don't see my mom because she said she didn't have anything to wear. And I was crushed. I was traumatized. And according to data from the 2016 National Survey of Children's Health, 46% of the nation's youth age 17 and under report experiencing at least one trauma. And sometimes as parents, you know exactly what the trauma is because you're living it as well, and sometimes you don't. So what exactly is trauma? Most of the time when we think of trauma, we think about specific events. So veterans coming back from war, or domestic violence, or a natural disaster. Those are the things we kind of think about. But trauma isn't necessarily an event, but something about an event that has dysregulated your central nervous system. It's really about the physical response in your body to an event and not the nature of the event. So many things that you might not consider trauma could be having a traumatizing effect on your teen. It could be a breakup or an argument at home before leaving school, or witnessing something on TV, because two people can experience the exact same thing and not react in the same way. So a little bit about the biology of trauma. The part of the body that's responsible for this reaction is the sympathetic nervous system, which prepares us for fight or flight. And when our system is dysregulated by things that are traumatizing to us, we might begin to overreact to things that we shouldn't overreact to. And the part of the brain that's responsible for reasonable thinking and language skills shuts down. So you can see I have a little fire sign by the sympathetic nervous system, because that's what gets us ready. Our pupils dilate, our heartbeat speeds up, our breathing gets quicker. This helps us to react quickly and sometimes explosively. Our other system, the parasympathetic nervous system, is what helps us to calm down and prevents the body from working overtime and kind of restores calmness. When we experience something that is traumatizing, when our teens experience something that is traumatizing, it's that sympathetic nervous system that takes over and determines how our kids might react in the face of adversity. So like I mentioned before, 46% of children under the age of 17 report experiencing at least one trauma. So why is this important? The ACEs study, or the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, involves 17,000 people. And while the people in this study were predominantly white, educated, and middle class, what it revealed about adverse childhood experiences or trauma experiences is that they're actually pretty common. They're not just problems in communities of color or in working class communities. They occur in clusters, which means they happen. Usually there's more than one happening at a time. Most importantly, it's the basis for many common public health problems. It's a strong predictor of later social functioning and well-being, health risks, diseases, and even death. There are 10 types of childhood trauma measured in the ACE study. 5 of them are personal and include physical, verbal, sexual abuse, physical neglect, and emotional neglect. And the other 5 are related to family members. So a parent who's an alcoholic, a parent who's a victim of domestic violence, a family member in jail, or a family member diagnosed with mental illness, and the disappearance of a parent through divorce, death, or abandonment. Each type of trauma counts as one. So a person who's being physically abused with an alcoholic parent and a mother who experienced domestic violence would have an ACE score of 3. And as your ACE score increases, so does the risk of disease, social, and emotional problems. But there are also factors that help protect you against having a high ACE score. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. So what are the normal changes that your teenager might be going through? Teenagers ages 15 to 17 might have more interest in romantic relationships and sexuality. They might go through less conflict with their parents, although you may or may not be experiencing less conflict. They may show more independence from parents, have a deeper capacity for caring and sharing, and developing more intimate relationships. They might spend less time with their parents and more time with their friends. They may even feel a lot of sadness or depression, which can lead to changes in their grades, alcohol or drug abuse, unsafe sex, and other problems. Teenagers should begin to learn more defined work habits, show more concern about future school and work plans, and be better able to give reasons for their choices. So mental health awareness, some things that might affect our teenagers' development besides trauma is also mental health, and the two can kind of go hand in hand. So before COVID, 1 in 6 US youth aged 6 to 17 experienced a mental health disorder each year. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by the age of 14. And suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34. Actually, that's supposed to be 10 to 24 in the United States. Something important to note as well is that for the first time in many years, the suicide rate is actually beginning to go down. But it is not going down, and it's actually increasing for Black and Brown children. We're also not being treated at the same rates as our white counterparts. So annual treatment rates for African-American people is about 32.9% compared to 50.3% for white people. So between March and May of last year, during COVID, there was a 25% increase in the number of mental health emergency visits by kids aged 5 to 11, and a 31% increase for teens aged 12 to 17. So again, how are trauma and mental health related? People who have experienced trauma, as I just said in the ACE study, have a higher chance of experiencing a mental health issue like anxiety, depression, or PTSD. And we've all actually gone through something pretty traumatic and still going through it. And that would be the global-wide pandemic COVID, which shut down our schools, which also disproportionately affected Black and Brown communities. Our teenagers are struggling with social and academic anxiety. The return to full-time in-person learning has been a hard transition for a lot of our students, and it does impact our students. So trauma and mental health issues can impact our students in some of the same ways, socially, emotionally, and behaviorally. So you might find that your teen has low or no self-awareness, low or no capacity to self-evaluate or self-regulate, to establish goals and to act consistently on them. They might have poor self-image or be likely reacting rather than being intentional about their decisions, or becoming self-centered or narcissistic. Doesn't want to move forward right now. Other impacts on memory function and learning. Sometimes people who've suffered emotional trauma can have lapses in their cognitive abilities and have trouble focusing on simple tasks. They might have trouble managing their emotions or self-soothing when stressed, becoming overwhelmed by stress chemicals, experiencing unexplained anger or outrage. So here are some warning signs and symptoms that you might look out for in your teen. And I'm not going to read all of them, so I'll give you kind of a second to kind of read over them and just kind of point a few out. But they might begin to avoid friends and social activities. You might notice changes in their sleep habits, maybe inability to carry out their daily activities, or feelings of sadness, which can include crying for no reason, irritable or annoyed mood, feelings of worthlessness or guilt, extreme sensitivity to rejection or failure, or the need for excessive reassurance. There's a quote, and I'm not quite sure who said it, but the quote goes, "If adolescents can't make sense of their suffering, the world will have to pay for it until they can." So how do we try to help our students make sense of their world? Well, one of the ways that we do this in school is by teaching them social and emotional learning, or SEL. And it's a strength-based approach that focuses on their potential, their strengths, and their capabilities. The definition for social and emotional learning is here. And it's the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So in short, if you look at this little wheel to the right, social and emotional learning is self-management, is self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. The story that I told you all earlier is from my book, V.A.L.U.E.D, Things I Wish My Mom Would Have Told Me. And in the book, I just try to make social and emotional learning easier to understand for parents and for students, but most importantly, related to real life, because I was experiencing SEL before I ever knew it existed or it was a thing. So I'm going to share some lessons from my book, V.A.L.U.E.D, to help you all with positive parenting. So the first tip, and Fiona, I think, is going to go more into it, is relationship. Research shows that having a good support network is the single most powerful protection against trauma and mental health issues. It's knowing that someone is taking care of things and that you are safe. Not that everything is perfect, but that you are not alone. So turn up the connection. I often tell teachers that kids work for people that they like. They disclose information to people that they feel comfortable with. So talk to your teen until you're blue in the face, because consistency is key and nothing is more important than the child-parent relationship. Our attachment to our parents really does influence how we relate to others. is voice. So teaching your teen to use their voice, because everyone has a story. Encourage your students to identify their feelings, their thoughts, their values, and their experiences, and letting them know that their voice is for them and for no one else. It's not to get anyone else to change, but it's for them to express how they feel. Help them to build their emotional vocabulary. And you can do that by being an example, talking about how you feel. I feel happy. I feel sad. I feel frustrated. I feel overwhelmed, because we know that the ability to precisely express how you feel is also going to be linked to better coping skills and better mood regulation. So take a few minutes each day to just kind of talk about and describe feelings and label those emotions. Lesson 2 is affirm, or self-management under this SEL wheel. Be an example first, affirm yourself, and then help your students to see their strengths and their positives. Help them to create a plan for challenges, because no one is perfect and no one is good at everything. Teach them to know that they can do hard things. Again, that's part of that affirmation, that if something is hard, they can still do it if they put a little more time or a little more effort into it. A lot of times our students don't know what their strengths are, and it's our job to help them discover their strengths. So teach them and model those healthy habits. The third lesson is you are loved. So in the book, I talk about this notion of being inherently valued, which just means that you are valued no matter what you've gone through, who you are. It belongs to you by nature or habit, even if you don't believe it. You are loved. That's self-love. And that self-love spills over into relationships. So before you can have healthy relationships with other people, you first have to have a relationship with yourself. So it's just expressing that love and letting students know that they are loved. That's building those relationship skills. The lesson 4, the U in valued, is understood. So making sure that you are clear and understood and working to understand others. Empathy, building that empathy or that ability to take the perspective of someone else. What's going on around you? How does it affect you? How does it affect others? And how can you help others? Expert, self-awareness and self-management, as in become an expert on yourself. That goes along with using your voice, because the more you use your voice, the more you learn about yourself and how you feel and the things that help you to cope. You're better able to manage yourself and to achieve your goals. The D in valued is for develop and decision-making skills. So develop healthy habits, sleep, diet, exercise, and self-care, which Fiona is going to go more into. But help your student to set goals. Start with the end in mind and then work your way backwards. Write out the goal, write out the purpose for the goal, and then help them to make decisions that help them to reach their goal. So if their goal is to go to college after high school, you're going to need to get good grades. So just helping them to see that the purpose and writing out action steps to help them to get there. Okay, so that is the valued acronym, those kind of 6 lessons to kind of help our students just become more self-aware, help them to manage their emotions a little bit better and to make those healthy decisions and to achieve their goals, and also to understand and relate to others as well. The story I told earlier may seem like something small, right? Maybe nobody coming to your 8th grade graduation, but maybe not. Either way, it's something that affected me for a long time. And it wasn't until 20 years later that my mom realized that I was still kind of hurting from that. And she apologized 20 years later. And so my encouragement to you is that it's never too late to start to make that connection with your students and help them to kind of realize these goals. And Fiona's going to go ahead and talk to you more about self-care and how to emotionally connect with your teens.
Okay, thank you so much. Just going to continue again from where Ava left off, and really talking about the importance of our self-care as the parents or the caregivers. So if you can go to the slide before, that really, as parents, as caregivers, we impact our children in more ways than we think. So I'm going to be sharing with you both from a professional standpoint, but certainly as well as a mom, who has teenagers and is going through this journey with you. Have high school as well, so going through this journey with you. So again, how we are as parents, as caregivers, certainly does impact our children, our teens, and so that's why it's so important for us as parents, as caregivers, to manage stress, to create a safe space for our teens, to create again that consistency, as Ava was talking about in her presentation. So self-care is important. Self-care is not selfish. I tell parents, remind myself that self-care is parenting. Self-care is parenting. So think of that. When you're practicing self-care, you are actually parenting, because when you are in a better mental space and you are able to show up for your children in a better way, you're able to be calm, and the sympathetic nervous system that Ava talked about. When I'm in the parasympathetic nervous system, then I'm more calm and I can really interact with my children or grandchildren, wherever, from a more calm space. So that is so important. And I find maybe it's just could be me, but I do find, especially in the teenage years, the teens get to the adolescents, they tend to trigger things in us as parents. And sometimes we're having stress and tension in the relationship because we haven't, those teens are triggering things in us. So being able to first identify that, and then also taking the time to manage stress, to care for ourselves. So a very simple thing to do is breathing. It's amazing how many of us are not breathing. So even right now, if I tell you breathe, then I just relaxed, and I was able to oh, wait a minute, I was kind of, I'm talking, but I'm tense, I'm somewhat holding my breath. So just simple things like breathing, especially when when we're under enormous amount of stress. Just a simple thing as breathing can just help you, again, brings oxygen to your brain, and it can help you be more present. So we can even just do this together right now. I want you, where you are, I want you to do a body scan. So I'm going to talk you through it first, and then we'll do it. We're going to close our eyes, and I just want you to scan your body from the top of your head to your feet, to your toes, and just identify areas where you're feeling tension. And once you've identified that area, you can even put it in the chat, afterwards, because I want you to kind of close your eyes and kind of just go through this. And then once you've identified the space where you have tension, just want you to breathe. Simple thing is just breathing and relaxing your muscles. So let's do this together. All right, I can't see you, so we're gonna do this together. So close your eyes. Now I want you to do a scan. Just go from the top of your head all the way down to your feet. I want you to identify a place where you're feeling tension. You're feeling maybe you're holding, you're feeling tension. For me, I normally feel it in my belly, so just by simply breathing in and out, it helps me just relax. So I want you to do the same thing. Just once you've identified that area of tension, I just want you to breathe in and out and just relax. Just something as simple as that, just breathing. So if you're able to identify it, put it in the chat, like a way I felt the tension. Maybe it's in your shoulders, in your head, in your arms, in your stomach, wherever it is, just put that in the chat. But this is something you can do on a regular basis. when you're just going throughout the day, just stop and breathe. You know, I like these Apple Watches. They remind you to breathe. I'm like, well, I was breathing already, but really, you're not breathing. You know, we just go through. But just taking the time to relax and relax our muscles, breathe in and out, can really help you can be present and be more in a more relaxed state as you're interacting with your teens. Uh, so again, just put that in the chat, just, you know, areas that where you find tension. And then the next thing is good diet and exercise. That is so important. It's amazing. I was reading, I read one quote that talked about exercise being one of the most underutilized depression or anti-anxiety really cures. So the good diet and the exercise is going to be important. Again, you don't have to be doing CrossFit or anything super intense like that, but just walking, just simply doing walking. You can walk outside as it gets cold. You can still walk indoors. YouTube has so many resources that you can use. So good diet, exercise, that is so important. Eating your vegetables, drinking your water. Again, all these things are part of your self-care, because when you are in a good mental space, you're able to be present for your teens. And as we heard, there has to be consistent presence with our teens. Mindfulness meditation, you can download some apps. It's a Calm, Abide, Soul Time. There's so many out there. Headspace that you can download, and that can help you, just remind you to do some breathing throughout the day, or in the evening, or whatever, just as you're going about your day. Self-regulation is important. Because again, most times, you know, our teens are triggering things in us, so we have to be able to self-regulate. This is part of your self-care, because when you're able to self-regulate, our teens are feeding off of us. So when you're able to self-regulate, it puts, again, our kids, our teens in that parasympathetic nervous system. So even as they're being triggered, when we're self-regulated, then it encourages them to be self-regulated. It helps them to be more self-regulated. So we talk about self-regulation, focusing on what you can control. There's certain things that you can control, things that are out of your control. For example, COVID was totally out of our control. So just being able to identify, hey, what's within my control, what's out of my control. Those things that are out of my control, I need to let go. Those things are within my control, then I need to see how I can make the adjustments, or how I can seek help, or how just get support on that. That's your regulating. So the things, your teen comes home and maybe the grades are not the best. You can't control what they're doing in class, but you can certainly control maybe the environment at home, encouraging them to do their homework. And one thing that worked for me was when I was when I was really frustrated with my with my kids, as in high school, when they have the mind of their own, want to do their own thing, was just being able to sit down with them at the at the dining room table and say, hey, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do my work, and you're going to do your work. So since things like that, those are within your control, but you can't control what happens to them once they go to class. So this is part of your self-care. This is my control, and what's out of my control. Acknowledge your feelings, as Ava talked about, being able to use those emotions. I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry, overwhelmed, frustrated, I'm feeling disappointed. All this. It's important for you, first of all, to acknowledge your own feelings, and a great way to do that is to journal. And it doesn't have to be anything long, and it has to be pages and pages. Just simply like, hey, today I was feeling really frustrated, and maybe identify what was helpful or what is not helpful. So acknowledging your own feelings. When you are more in touch with who you are and what's going on within you, you won't quite be as triggered even with your teens. But even if you are able to identify what you're feeling and why you were triggered. Focus on the present moment. It is, COVID-19 has it forced us to slow down, but now things are ramping up again. So this is just a good reminder for us to say, okay, I need to focus on the present. These are the things that I can see, things I can control, focusing on the present. So most times we're missing out on what's happening in the present because we're looking at the future. We have all these concerns, and those are all valid, but just kind of focusing, reminding yourself to focus on the present. And then being kind to yourself. We're going to make mistakes as parents. Absolutely, we're going to make mistakes. And we need to be kind to ourselves, we need to forgive ourselves. We need to, when you misspeak or you say something that's hurtful, or even if your teen says, hey, that was hurtful, you apologize, and then you just remind yourself like, okay, I'm going through this. I'm learning as I go, and especially with our teens, each child is different. One child can be super compliant, like, hey, I don't even have to say anything. They do what they're supposed to do. And then the others that need a little more work. So I've been blessed with those. Yeah, I think blessed with all three that need a little more work. But just being kind to yourself when you fail, when you feel like I haven't lived up to maybe your own expectations or societal expectations, but just be kind to yourself. So this is some self-care. This is some just general things. There's a lot more, but I'm gonna move on to the next part, which is the teen care. As Ava talked about, that emotional connection with our teens is so important. That's so needed. So with our teens, as we're taking care of of ourselves, we also need to be taking care of our teens. We gotta be patient and be present with our teens. I have found that sometimes teens will come and talk to you usually at the most, well, not usually, but sometimes at the most inopportune time. Like you're deep into something, you really need to focus on this thing, and they want to come and have a conversation. But we gotta resist the temptation to blow them off, because sometimes they could even be testing you to see, will you be present? Are you the secure attachment? When I need you, are you going to be present? So if you can, by all means, stop whatever you're doing and focus on the teens. Again, it's just a few more years. They're going to be out of your home. So give them that attention. Or if you need to say, hey, in 5 minutes, I'm going to come back. Can we talk about this in 5 minutes? At least communicate to them so they know that they are prioritized and that you are noticing them, that you see them. Our teens need to be seen. So we gotta be patient, I guess, even when those times we don't feel like talking, we don't feel like being present. We're dealing with our own stuff. That's why we're gonna have, engaging in self-care every day. Something small, again, if it's just breathing, but you're making sure you're prioritizing the self-care so that you can be more patient, so that you can be more present with our teens. We wanna listen. Listen. We're not trying to solve problems. I know we gotta resist. I remind myself I need to take off my Bob the Builder hat. Bob the Builder, wants to fix things. I have to take off my Bob the Builder hat and just listen. In that moment, and in listening, validates. Like, oh, I hear you. Wow, that sounds really difficult. And then you want to empower, telling them, hey, I know, Ava talked about this. I know you have what it takes to resolve this situation. So you want to empower them. You want to help. You want to guide them. Depending on what age they are, guide them in that problem solving. Seek help. Sometimes, as you're talking, like, hey, this is beyond me. How about, we talk to the school social worker. How about we take you to, how about therapy? Or how about you talk to, maybe a trusted adult in their life. So that's your emotionally connecting. You're not just leaving them out there. We're not solving things for them, but we are helping them. We're empowering them and guiding them and working together on that. Emotional connection is hugging. It's a simple thing, but it does something amazing. Again, when we're talking about the sympathetic nervous system, so when our kids have gone through trauma, or you yourself, but certainly here we're talking about kids who've gone through trauma, a simple thing as hugging them can again put them in the sympathetic nervous system space. So we can go to the next one. This is just a question to ask yourself. When's the last time you hugged your kids? For some of you do really well. With others, not so well. Especially when our teens are triggering us, the last thing we want to do is hold them. The last thing we want to do is hug them. Sometimes we love them but don't like them. But that hug is so important. So Virginia Satir said, we need 4 hugs a day for survival. We need 8 hugs a day for maintenance. We need 12 hugs a day for growth. when I read this, I said, oh my goodness, I am falling way behind here. um, because sometimes my kids will get hugged, once a day, or maybe every other day. But I have to remind myself that I need these hugs and my kids need these hugs. So even those moments when we are triggered, the moments we don't feel when we don't feel like holding them, or we want to be able to just take that moment and hug. And sometimes they might want to, push you away. But, say, hey, can I come in for a hug? And hug. We have a daughter, she'll say, no, I don't want a hug. But we know that she would really like the hug. Sometimes it's like, okay, how bad do you want this? She plays hard to get, but that's okay. So because, and we know that she needs those hugs. We need, I need them for as a mom, but our teens need those hugs. So finding times, just going to their room, into their space, and just going there. Sometimes we have to resist the going into their space just to give instructions, just to tell them what they should be doing or not doing. But just going to that space and like, hey, how are you doing? Sit on the bed. Small thing like this, sit on the bed. Where possible, depending on the relationship, where possible. Sometimes you just lay on the bed then, and they might say, hey, what are you doing on my bed? It's like, hey, I'm just here. I just want to be with you. That's, do you do that? You certainly even just give a hug on your way in or your way out. But I like this quote here: hugging is the most beautiful form of communication that allows the other person to know beyond a doubt that they matter. So hugging is the most beautiful communication that allows your teens, your son and your daughter, to know beyond a doubt that they matter. And our teens are never too old for hugs. They might say, yes, they're too old. They might say, I don't want it, but they need it. So go in there and say, hey, can I come in for a hug? But something like as simple as this, again, can get them in get their parasympathetic nervous system active. So hugging. And then the final thing here, you may not be able to see this clearly, but I saw these things and I thought it was really good and fun to share. 66 positive things to say to your child. Our touching and our words are so important for our kids. Our presence, our consistency, our hugging, the words that we speak are so important. We have to remember that the words that we are speaking to our children, again, become the inner voice throughout their lives. So the words that you speak to them are very important. So these are just a few examples to say, I'm grateful for you. You make me proud. Your words are meaningful. So when you ask them a question like, well, I don't know, say, hey, your words are meaningful. I want to hear it. You have great ideas. I love being your parent. Even sometimes at the moment you may not feel like it, but I love being your parent, reminding them of that. You don't have to be perfect to be great. Your opinions matter. You are important. You are loved. I can go, I'm not going to read all of them. I learn new things from you every day. You make me better. I'm glad you're here. You look great. So just simple things like that, positive things that we can say to our children that are going to certainly help kids be in a more positive environment. And so I hope these resources, these tools have been helpful to you.
Thank you.
Complimenting you did so well. Thank you. So anyway, I'm done. Thank you.
Excellent. No, you're not going anywhere though. I'm so glad you're right here. Fiona, Ava, come back.
Yes.
I've taken tons of notes and we're going to talk about our notes, and you gave us so much to think about. And I think you can't hear this information often enough. I think life gets in the way, and we know so much of this intuitively, don't we? We know it, and yet it's so hard, and yet it's so simple. So some of the things that I wrote down that I will take away: the naming it to tame it. That and how important it is for us to model that. Teach them the vocabulary of that emotion, and I think it's so important. You both touched on this, how in this time of COVID, which has increased our anxiety tenfold, it's so easy to say, you have a roof over your head, you have food on the table. And I know those things come so easily. And I can imagine how that is being heard at the other end when their emotions are so valid and so sincere. Can you talk about that a little bit, Ava and Fiona? Why we don't want to go there, and what we need to do instead when they do share with us.
Certainly, I'll talk and I'll let Ava jump in. Most times we ourselves don't know how to respond. We are operating out of fear. Mm-hmm. So when we are afraid, then we tend to kind of push back, on them. Our defenses go up, and then we start talking about all the things that should be going well, they should be grateful for, because we don't know what to say. So in those moments, like, you know what, this is tough. I hear you. This is tough for me too. I mean, who knew that we'd be living, through a pandemic? And I hear you. We're going through this together. We're figuring this thing out. So be patient with me. Give me grace. As we're working through. But I hear you. And validate.
Beautiful.
Fiona, I totally agree with that validation. I feel like sometimes as parents, and we're both parents, we get overwhelmed too. You were talking about that self-care. Like, if you're not taking care of yourself, you don't have anything to give to anybody. So your self-care is important. And we get overwhelmed as well. So just being honest and saying that I feel overwhelmed too. Like you said, I'm right there with you. At the start of the pandemic, when school shut down, my son was in 5th grade. And, he was like really sad because they do like a 5th grade celebration and they were supposed to do all this like fun stuff. And my initial reaction to him was, well, at least it's not 8th grade graduation, high school graduation. What about the college kids? They don't get a graduation. And I had to check myself, and I went back and actually apologized. So I'm like, no, 5th grade is important to you. And it's important to me if it's important to you. Yeah. And it's a big deal. Like, what else can we do to celebrate you? Yeah. So, just being willing to validate, right, Fiona, like you said. So it's like, at least you're not in college, at least you're not missing your college graduation. But 5th grade is a big deal to him and all the other 5th graders. Exactly. So, validating that.
And I like what you said, that you went back and you apologized. And I heard you both say it's never too late. And what a good thing to model, that you can, I have a twin 5-year-old grandchildren. And apparently my son was telling me that the teacher mentioned to them, you're going to hear from your kids are going to say to you, boy, that teacher, she's making mistakes all the time. Because every time she makes a mistake, she says, oh, I made a mistake. And so she said, so the fear was that the kids are going to come home and say, that teacher is making a lot of mistakes. But can you talk about that, those mistakes, and then again, the modeling about that?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it with that developing and decision-making with setting goals, right? Or, I think, or even talking about just, affirming yourself, right? Like, there's some things that we're great at, and then there are some things that we're not so great at. And that is everyone, because no one is good at everything. And so we make mistakes, and we try to make a plan, like, okay, well, how can I, compensate, for these things, and modeling, like you said, and modeling that as parents, even like, okay, I'm not, again, I'm helping my son with math. And I'm like, when he got to middle school, I was like, I can't be your math tutor anymore. Like, I don't know enough math. So I need to hire a tutor, a math teacher who can actually help you. And being okay with saying that, like, no one is perfect at everything, but let's make a plan. For you. Let's make a plan.
Right. The other thing I wrote down, I've heard this and you sort of touched on it, that somebody said to me, remember why we have 2 ears. The 2 ears are for listening. And so, and to, once again, as you said, acknowledge, validate, and then, and not fix it, but have them develop the skills and say, what do you need from me now in this moment? Can you speak about that?
Yeah, so certainly. Again, the listening, we're not fixing things. We have to resist that temptation as parents, because we know we can fix this. We got the answer. Most times we have the answer, But again, letting them kind of struggle through it, but we're helping them, we're guiding them, we're empowering them and we're guiding them through it. And then, yeah, like what you said, like, what do you need from me? And depending what they ask for, if it's reasonable, then it's yes, let's do this. This is what I can do. Other things like, well, no, we can't do this. Sometimes like, well, if you give me money, then all will be well. But I think that question is, what Gil said, that question is so important. What do you need from me? Because it's causing them to have to think, okay, I have this resources. How am I going to use this resource? Or what do you need from your teacher? And then they're able to really identify, okay, this is what I need from them, helping them think through that and not us just thinking through for them. So that's important because we are raising adults,
Right.
they're adults. And so
Right.
it's ours to be. And so we're going to empower them.
I'm making a big sign that says, turn up the connection. Because I think if you just remember those few words, turn up the connection. And we've got a program coming up, and it's exactly titled about the importance of everyday interactions. How we can't minimize that, can we? That and I like when you said, this is not a great time. The phone's ringing, someone's at the door, and that's when they're ready to talk. And I understand late at night sometimes when we're exhausted and they're ready to talk. But make yourself available at that moment when they need us. Smile at them when they walk in the door, no matter what's going on. Make them feel like they are the most important person and that you love them because they're yours, because it's not about who you wished for, who you hoped for, who you imagined or dreamed about. That child needs you. You are it to the world, and they need to know that, right? As many times as we can. Someone said that we should be giving ourselves as parents a pass-fail grade right now. No A, B, C, D, right? We're gonna go with that. And then, the other sign based on what you said, I've never heard it said this way, and I think it's really terrific, about self-care is parenting. They are the same thing, aren't they? If you're not filling your own vessel, how can you possibly give it back?
Mhm.
Speak to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think we do more damage to our kids when we're not taking care of ourselves. Because when we're irritable, again, we're empty, we have nothing else to give. We do. That's when we say things that are hurtful to our kids. That's when we withdraw or we withhold rather the love, the care, the attention that they need because we don't have it, within ourselves. So that self-care is important. Of course, you're not being neglectful of your duties, but like the simple thing is breathing, exercising, eating well, journaling, taking that moment to watch a little show that you like. But when they come in, I like what you said, that eye contact is important. So put the phone down, like I'm here, I'm present for you. But yeah, back to the self-care, that's so important.
Right. And I feel so strongly too about the breath, the slow breath, the just centering yourself so then you can, it made me think about this expression. I said this the other day. I read this, be forgiving about your past, be strict about your present, your sleep, your exercise, all the things that you mentioned, and flexible about your future. So I'm going to be strict about my present with my exercise and my sleep and my liquids. Thank you very much for the reminder. I really appreciate that. That's really, really important. So, the communication piece is so key. I just had a conversation with a parent today, and we talked about the things that need to be said. And what I heard from that parent is, wait, you're saying that I'm going to have a conversation. This child is not listening to me. How do I start a conversation? Give us some pointers.
One of the things that one of the interventions that I suggest to a lot of teachers is something called a 2x10 method. And really all it is spending 2 uninterrupted minutes. I know teacher's time is like super precious, but it's spending 2 uninterrupted minutes for 10 days in a row talking to the student about anything except school, right? No, like, did you do your homework? But just like, oh, just catch the basketball game or, I heard you like soccer, and just 2 minutes. And so I think that parents can do something like that as well. Where, and this is, I use this for students who, a little behaviorally challenged, when teachers are trying to connect with them. And I was like, the first couple of days are going to be rough because they're going to be like, why are you talking to me? So, but if you are consistent, like that consistency is key, because kids will try to wear you down. Like, let me see how long you're going to go. Let me see if I can really trust you. If you're consistent and you stick with it, eventually you might get a smile or, yeah, I watched the game, like, yeah, I do play soccer. Yeah, I like to sing, and just building on that. So just, scheduling that uninterrupted time, being very intentional about it, I think is something good to try.
I think if I can just add something to, as parents, when our kids reject us, I'll say reject because they're not really rejecting us. Sometimes like work harder, try harder. Do you really mean it? As parents, we have to be careful not to take things personally, because those words or those actions of rejection can trigger us as parents, and like, all the things that I do for you, you see how you're treating me? We have to be careful to realize, okay, maybe they just want me to work harder. I need to come back again next time. This time they didn't open the door. That's okay. But we keep getting but we want to make sure that we're not taking things personally, because our teens do love us as parents. They love you. They love you, parents. And so just be patient with them, especially when you're initiating something new like this. If you haven't been spending the time with them or talking to them, it's going to take some time. But don't take things personally.
That's the book I'm going to write, Fiona. It's going to be called "It's Not About Me," and I think that's what happens sometimes. You think. I tell the story about how GPS started. The whole thing started 27 years ago. My daughter and I were shopping, and the woman who was taking care of us said to my daughter, "Oh, you look so much like your mother." I thought she was going to be like jumping up and down, my daughter, and I thought she was going to really attack the woman at the very least for saying this. And I realized this is going to be hard. This is really, really tough. And it's so easy to say, oh, I've raised this entitled child. Look what happened. But it's really not about us. It's everything that's going on in their lives at this time, right? And I loved what you said about don't have every conversation be about school. And find, another thing that comes to me, one of our speakers talked about, if you see a passion in your child, pour gasoline on it. So try to find those things that they're excited, and you get excited about them too. And if we're not, that you get excited about them too. And for the last question, because we could talk for hours, ladies, and everybody's put in a long day, I'm sure. But is there a difference between boys and girls in their communication techniques that we should be aware of? I mean, what comes to mind, and I'll tell you what comes to mind. We often hear about boys being at, this one-on-one. So that's where I'm going. You don't want to be doing that. So.
A lot of times I feel like we see girls as more like they communicate more. But I was actually like in a training, and it talked about how boys actually really do want to connect, and they just feel like they can't, because like society things. But that they were really expressing when asked that they feel kind of alone, and they like having friends and people to connect with. So I think all our children need the same.
Yeah. And again, going into their space whenever possible, just sitting on the bed. It's small things, Again, I'm speaking as a parent as well. I've heard my kids like, hey, I like it when you just come sit on my bed. Sometimes they'll, say, hey, I want you to get out, but another part of them is saying, I want you to stay. So you kind of just doing that. Boys like that too. Getting into their world, whatever games they're playing. I think those are, but I agree, both need that connection. You just have to get into their space.
So Ava, I have a question for you, the last question. You raised some issues when we should be concerned about when there's an issue. And since you are in a school, so I'm a parent, I've heard this conversation, you've raised some red flags that I should be the changes that I'm noticing. And now I'm, where do I start?
I feel like one of the easiest places to start is with your school team. In our school district, especially, all of our students have a team. A lot of our kids don't know, but they all have a team. They know their counselor, but their team also includes a social worker. Their team includes a school psychologist, as well as their dean, and a nurse as well. So reach out to that school-based team. We can offer support at school. If it's something that's maybe more home-based, we can offer community resources and support, and give referrals to outside therapy and things like that. So sometimes I think it's just easier to start at school. You can find all our names, all our numbers on your respective school websites, whether it's East, West, North, or South.
So school counselors and the team that's right there with them. Yes.
Mhm.
And Fiona, I know you're going to say the very same thing about you've heard some things tonight and you've got concerns about it's okay to ask for help. And doesn't that role model for your child that you, and I heard someone say the other day, I think I'm going to I can see there's something here that we need some help, and better to do it now when my child is in high school than when they're away at college, and I can be a little bit more involved and make it okay that it's an okay thing, that it's okay to ask for help.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, and as parents, it's okay for us to go to therapy too. Let's model that, So it's not just like, oh, this is my child who has the issue, who needs to go to therapy. It's like, I just need support. I'm going through this pandemic, mommy needs some help. She needs somebody to talk to, so let's normalize that and model that.
Right. Well, I know you've helped me, and I know Susanna's here, Michael's here, and I know we have lots of parents listening tonight. So generous of you to spend that time with us, you and all the listeners. This is recorded. In a couple of days, you can find it, this and other recordings, on the Glenbard Parent Series YouTube channel. And also, if you go to glenbardgps.org, to the website, take a look at past programs. If there's a topic that has interest to you, then go ahead and take a look at the programs that we recorded right there on their page. Everybody, we're going to go and hug our children, and we're going to do it not 8 times, not 12 times, but as many times as we can fit in one day. I so appreciate you. Susanna's still there, and she'd probably want me to mention, if you have parents who speak Spanish, Thursday night at 7 o'clock, go to glenbardgps.org for the link for BPAC and GPS. Are planning a program on Thursday that will be in Spanish. We'll cover some of these topics and also how to navigate some of the tools that are available for parents. And then this is Suicide Awareness Month. So for everyone, we have really focused on this month, and we've got some amazing programs coming up on September 23rd. Lisa DeMoore with Lori Gottlieb at 7 and at noon. And then at the end of the month, we've got a program called Suicide, Let's Talk About It. And talking about it is what we need to do. We should not be afraid. Science tells us that in talking about it, it's not, as we have been led to believe, that this is going to put an idea in someone's head. We need to talk about it, and we're going to talk about it. Value your time. Thank you so much. Come back, spread the word. We'll see you again. Have a great evening, everybody. Thank you.